Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thickness. As you know, this is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. So today we're going to be looking at another Zionist shield getting their asses handed over to them. And this time it's going to be done by Professor Norman Finkelstein. And he's just going to destroy Benny Morris, who is a prominent Israeli historian, a Zionist shield. These are people who run cover for the genocide, for the ethnic cleansing that Israel continues to do. Piers Morgan seems to be able to host these shows where he just brings on, these genocidal hacks. But what's interesting about this is that Benny Morris is going to call, because he doesn't have any points, he's going to call Norman Finkelstein a self-hating Jew. That's the best he can. That's the best he can do. And he's going to try to give this air of impartiality as though he's nuanced, he's balanced. But Finkelstein is going to expose him for the fraud that he is, as someone who supports genocide, as someone who supports ethnic cleansing, as he himself has said in his books, which he denies. So let's get into it.
Well, joining me to debate this is author and political scientist Norman Finkelstein and historian and Professor Benny Morris. Well, welcome to both of you. Norman Finkelstein, welcome back to Uncensored. This whole issue of what is going on the West Bank, I've had Daniela Weiss saying that this is merely a case of Jewish people reclaiming their land, nothing to see here, nothing criminal. They're not doing harm to anybody. But we just heard obviously from a Palestinian Christian pastor who says the complete opposite. And certainly from the news footage we've seen, it's quite clear that Israeli settlers have been waging a campaign of terror on the West Bank now for a considerable period of time, which most of the international community views as criminal activity. What is your view of what is happening on the West Bank?
My view on what's happening in the West Bank is basically this, that the expulsion of the population in the West Bank and in Gaza is deeply rooted in Zionist ideology. As Benny Morris himself wrote, the idea of transfer, which is just a euphemism for expulsion, the idea of transfer is inherent and inbuilt in the idea of Zionism. And as Benny Morris himself said, the problem with the Israelis, or the problem with Ben-Gurion, David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, the problem with him was that, quote, he didn't complete the job. That's what Mr. Morris said. And also, Mr. Morris has written that that's a tiny spot of land, and there's no room, I'm quoting him, there's no room for two peoples in that land, and that there should be only one people there, one state, a Jewish state. So all of that is not new, but as your previous guest stated, there has been an escalation since October 7th. And that was pretty predictable because, as you know, the cliche, every crisis is also an opportunity. And the Israeli cabinet, not unlike, by the way, my own American government after 9/11, they shed some salty tears. Here I refer both to my government and the Israeli government. They shed some salty tears after the massacres and then rubbed their palms in glee. Here is an opportunity. In the case of my own government, the opportunity was first Afghanistan, then they thought Iraq, then they thought Syria, then they thought Iran. That was their plan, to exploit to the maximum 9/11. In the same way, Israel, since October 7th, yes, the salty tears were shed, and then they rubbed their palms in glee. Here is a unique opportunity. And the unique opportunity was first to solve the Gaza question once and for all. And the way they wanted to solve it was a massive expulsion, the means to achieve that massive expulsion was genocidal. And then they proceeded to eliminate Hezbollah, or they thought they eliminated Hezbollah. And now they're trying also in the West Bank. And of course, the big target was Iran. And there too, Benny Morris, for years, literally every couple of years, he would write an op-ed saying two things. Number one, Israel has to attack Iran. And number two, if the United States doesn't join in, Israel has no option except to use non-conventional, i.e. nuclear weapons. So the claim, the presumptions of Daniela Weiss are shared across the Israeli spectrum. Benny Morris described the Palestinians as, quote, a sick, psychotic people, quoting him. So the presumptions, the assumptions of Daniela Weiss, they may sound radical to an American viewer, but they are typical of Israeli society, from Daniela Weiss at one end of the spectrum to Benny Morris, who was once Israel's leading historian, at the other end of the spectrum. Just one last word. If you look at the current UN report on the deliberate killing of Palestinian children, they describe many scenes of the settlers. A group of settlers urinating on a child, a group of settlers kidnapping a 4- and 5-year-old child, brother and sister, and tying them to a tree. A bunch of Israeli soldiers, not settlers, soldiers attacking a 16-year-old who is hearing impaired and kicking him on the ground. And then a group of soldiers attacking a fellow, shooting him. He's on the ground pleading for help. The soldiers stand around laughing, filming the scene, and blocking any medical aid for him. The soldiers, remember, Israel is a citizen army. The soldiers are representative of Israeli society, just like Daniela Weiss at one end of the spectrum and Benny Morris at the other end is representative of Israeli society. It is, unfortunately, it has become a nation of child killers.
And one thing I like about Norman Finkelstein is that he always comes with receipts. He doesn't just make claims, he has evidence to back those claims up. And part of the evidence that he uses in this particular conversation are Benny Morris's own words. For example, in Righteous Victim by Benny Morris, he categorically stated that one of the big failings of Ben-Gurion is that he did not complete the transfer, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, and he believed that with time, that mistake by Ben-Gurion was going to come back to haunt the Jewish state. So in Benny Morris's own words, Ben-Gurion in 1947-48 was not radical enough. They should have cleansed the land totally and completely. One thing I like the Israelis for is that they are very unashamed and they are very honest about their psychopathy. They are very honest about the terrible things that they do. They probably don't see it as anything. I think it's a matter of hubris, because they think they're so superior that, whatever they do, however terrible it is justified. I mean, it's us. We can't do any wrong. So any terrible thing that they do is fine. It's okay. That's why they have no shame. There was a previous interview that Piers Morgan had with Daniela Weiss, who is a radical Israeli settler, right? And Piers Morgan literally asked this woman multiple times, do you think that an Israeli life is equal, or do you think a Palestinian life is equal to an Israeli life? And she would not answer that question multiple times. That just gives you an insight into the psychopathy of Israeli society. Now, coming over to the West Bank, Israel would say Hamas is the problem, Hamas is the problem, terrorism is the problem, extremism is the problem. You don't have any of that in the West Bank, yet they keep stealing Palestinian land in the West Bank. Yet about 100 Palestinian villages have been sacked since October 7, 2023, have been totally destroyed. People kicked out of 100 villages in the West Bank. And Palestinians in the West Bank keep being killed by Israel. So what gives? If the issue is extremism and Hamas, which you do not have in the West Bank, then why is Israel still acting in this manner? It goes to show you that those are excuses that Israel uses to justify its actions. They're not the real thing.
Benny Morris, your response to that?
Well, it sounds like a self-hating Jew, Norman Finkelstein, and the woman, Daniela Weiss, is obviously a religious messianic fanatic. I don't think either of them should represent anyone, and they certainly don't speak the truth about most Israelis, as Finkelstein would have it. The Israeli settlers in the West Bank, many of them are behaving illegally, and the government is going along with them and protecting them in various ways, certainly not prosecuting them for committing these crimes more or less on a daily basis in the West Bank, because they ultimately support eventual annexation of the West Bank, and they believe that removing small communities of shepherds serves that purpose, this annexationist purpose. And I, of course, and I think at least half of the Israelis don't agree with this. It doesn't represent the Israeli public, as Ms. Weiss, who's, as I say, a fanatic, doesn't as well.
But that doesn't make any sense. If the government and the fanatical settlers are aligned, then 50, and then in combination with that, 50% of Israeli society, because you said 50%, half of Israeli society does not support it. 50% of Israeli society supports that. That's a majority already. 50%, the settlers, the government support that action, support, cleansing the West Bank of Palestinians. So in what sense is Finkelstein wrong? He's not wrong in any sense. And Morris is just trying to paint a false picture. He's trying to give this false air of being nuanced and balanced and objective. And if he was truly objective, he would call for the dismantling of the apartheid state of Israel, but he isn't calling for any of that. He has admitted that the government is in support of these criminal and illegal actions by the settlers. But what are his proposals to deal with that? Crickets.
I did use the phrase psychotic, and the Palestinians certainly behaved in a psychotic way during the second Intifada, when they exploded bombs in buses and in streets and killed over 1,000 Israelis during that second Intifada, that rebellion in 2001, 2002, 2003. But I wouldn't call the Palestinians in general psychotic, but they have behaved very poorly. They're very poorly led. They're divided between one fanatical movement, which is misogynist, the Hamas, misogynist, homosexual, anti-homosexual, homophobic, Jew-hating, they're anti-Semitic, and they hate the West in general, much like the rest of the Islamic Islamist world.
Yeah, he's ticking off all the points that will trigger people in the West. Leaving the meat of the conversation, he's ticking off all those points. Oh, these people, they're anti-homosexual, they hate the West, they hate Jews, they're this, they're that, they are Islamists, they're extremists. It's not addressing the elephant in the room. If you are going to call Palestinians psychopaths for the actions that they took in the second Intifada, what happened in the first Intifada and what did it lead to? People only resort to violence when they have exhausted every other means of redress and their issues are not attended to. Jews, Jewish people, were the first to bring terrorism to the Middle East. Bombing of the King David Hotel, and so many other terrorist actions carried out by Lehi and Ergun against the British and against the Palestinians before 1948. Bring that same energy and call the Israeli society a psychopathic one, because it fits more, that label fits more the Israeli society.
And here we have a problem which Finkelstein doesn't seem to understand, that the war in Gaza was the first step in an Islamist, pan-Islamic war against the Jewish state, dedicated to eradicating the Jewish state. The Hamas began on the October 7th. The Hezbollah of Lebanon began the next day from Lebanon.
And this guy is a historian. This guy is a historian, and he totally discounts all the history of everything that has happened, and he's reducing it to simply anti-Semitism. These people just hate Jews. Oh my God.
And eventually the Houthis in Yemen and the Iranians from Iran itself all attacked successively the Jewish state. And Israel is surrounded by the Islamists who want to destroy the Jewish state. The Jewish state, Israel, doesn't say it wants to destroy the Islamic world or Iran or Lebanon, but this is the way it is, and Israel has basically been defending itself. I don't like the Israeli government. I don't like the way it defends. It defends Israel. It's done so incompetently. I don't believe, incidentally, in expulsion. I've never said that the country between the river and the sea belongs only to one people. That's not my position. There are two peoples there, both with claims to the land, and it should be ideally divided between the two peoples in two states. That's the ideal solution. The Palestinians have always rejected it. Today is the Israeli government.
They are right to reject it, because you cannot come from Europe and come claim a land somewhere else and expect the inhabitants of that land to agree with you to share their land. So by every moral, legal, philosophical, historical right, they were right to reject it.
Also rejects it, but most Israelis and many Israeli governments and the Zionist movement since 1937 has always agreed to partition and to two states between the river and the sea. Unfortunately, the Palestinians have always said no to this.
Okay, Norman Finkelstein, I want to play you a clip. This is from the Hamas spokesman, Ghazi Hamad, who came on Uncensored on Monday. Made a lot of news. Let's take a look.
Hamas as liberation organization, we never commit crimes. We never kill civilians. We try all the time to liberate our home from the
Well, that's
occupation.
complete nonsense, Mr. Hamad. Sorry, I have to interrupt there. When you say you don't commit crimes and you don't kill innocent civilians, we all saw what happened on October the 7th in 2023. You had 3,000 members of your organization, Hamas, pour over the Israeli border and commit a series of despicable crimes in which you massacred innocent civilians all over Israel. You then captured over 250 of them, including Holocaust survivors and a baby. So the idea you've not committed crimes is ridiculous.
No. I say 100%. I'm confident that 100%. We never commit crimes against civilians. Maybe some mistake happened, but it is not the policy of Hamas. It is not the
well, there weren't mistakes. You gunned down innocent people.
Most engineers hear the word BMS, but when they enter the...
Now, Norman, I mean, it is plainly ridiculous for the Hamas spokesman to try and pretend they didn't commit any crimes on October the 7th. I presume you would agree that's ridiculous.
Yes, I've said on several occasions, and here I'll echo your previous speaker, Montier, I guess his name is, Is that correct, his name? I don't want to mispronounce it.
Munter, yeah. I'm not sure
your
quite how the
previous-
local pronunciation is, yeah.
Yeah. He said, when you quoted him from his sermon right after October 7th, he said he wasn't aware of the magnitude of what happened on October 7th. And as you know, I have said the same thing. But once it was clear the magnitude of what happened, it was clear that crimes of a significant magnitude, war crimes, I know some human rights organizations will also say crimes against humanity, so crimes of a significant magnitude occurred on October 7th. So there's, as far as I could tell, no disagreement between us. I would say, however, some of the claims that were made about October 7th, for example, that Hamas had weaponized rape and sexual violence, I don't believe those claims have been borne out by the available evidence. If you allow me, Mr. Morris, you'll have your turn.
They weaponized rape.
You'll have your turn, Mr. Morris.
But
Allow me to have mine.
Why are you lying? Why are you lying?
Okay, Piers, you'll have to decide how to litigate at this point. Allow me my time. He will have his time. So as I said, there were crimes of a significant magnitude. Okay. Thank you so much. So on that point, there's no disagreement. The two issues, as I see it, between us, if you allow me, and you can, of course, disagree with me because I'm interpreting you. The two issues between us are, number one, the allocation of moral responsibility. I have said repeatedly that I refuse to condemn Hamas in the same way as my own country's abolitionists, those who oppose slavery, they refuse to condemn the largest and bloodiest slave rebellion led by Nat Turner. On the contrary, they said, speaking to white society, they said, we warned you, we warned you, we warned you. If you treat people this way, if you dehumanize them, if you exploit them, if you kill them, don't be surprised if at some point there will be a bloody, and they acknowledged, ugly slave rebellion. That is also my position on Gaza. That's number one. The second place where I believe we disagree, and here I consider it a significant disagreement, just as the first one is significant, where we secondly disagree is on your terminology. You describe what Israel has done as being disproportionate. You describe what Israel has done as being over the top. Those are your expressions. But in fact, what Israel has done is very proportionate. It's proportionate to its goal. Its goal is to achieve an ethnic cleansing by use of genocidal means. If that's your means, then what Israel has executed is proportionate. It's not over the top. It would be over the top or disproportionate if it were a war, if you were trying to inflict a military defeat on the opposing army. But that's not what's happening in Gaza. That's not what's happened since October 8th. The prime minister was very straightforward. He said, remember Amalek, kill every man, woman, child, and other things. Or President Herzog, there are no civilians in Gaza. Or Defense Minister Gallant, we're going to prohibit all food, fuel, water, and electricity from entering Gaza.
This is pure nonsense.
That's a formula.
Pure nonsense.
That's a formula for
Pure
genocide.
Okay.
Now,
when he's saying it's pure nonsense, these are documented statements captured in the video, in audio, and in writing. Israeli politicians made these statements. So what are you saying about it being pure nonsense? What are you saying? Everything Finkelstein has said Is correct. And going back to October 7th, you know, when those images began coming out from what happened on October 7th, I was really, really distressed by it, especially with that female Israeli soldier who was bound and put in the back of the truck. I was really distressed by that. So it goes without saying that Hamas did commit atrocities on October 7th. The atrocities themselves were bad enough that Israel did not have to lie. Israel did not need to fabricate things. The atrocities on their own were bad enough. Whatever happened to the 40 beheaded babies story, which was debunked? So what gives? Why do you have to lie? And that was one of the reasons that really got me started breaking up my position with Israel, started falling out with the Israeli narrative. I was like, okay, why do you have to lie? What Hamas did was terrible enough. Everybody saw the terrible things that happened on October 7th. You did not have to cook up more things.
Okay, let me ask you, Norman. Norman, let me ask you.
Last word.
Okay, but
Yes,
Norman,
excuse me.
I want to ask you one last thing too. I just want to ask you, it struck me listening to Benny Morris, who will respond in a moment. It struck me in his first response to you that he must have said a number of things in his response which you would, if you were being fair-minded, agree with. So what did you agree with him about in terms of his overview?
Well, here's the problem. Benny Morris, I'm speaking to him not as somebody who knows him personally, though we've met. Benny Morris wears many hats. He wears one hat when he's speaking in Israel or in some of his writings. But when he's speaking to a Western audience, like your program, he likes to appear to be humane, even a little bit impish, a little bit cherubic. He has a little smile and a laugh. So he is a moving target. I have asked him on several occasions. I have written more than 50 pages because I've read everything you've ever written multiple times. Just answer me in print. If I am misapprehending you, just what any scholar does, you reply. He says he will answer me. Right now, he'll probably say, oh, of course I'll answer Finkelstein, but he never will. So finally, you have to pull down the facade and expose somebody who on all political and ideological issues is indistinguishable from Daniela Weiss.
And Finkelstein is absolutely correct. Benny Morris is a chameleon who puts on a different persona depending on who he's speaking to. So when he's speaking to Israelis, he's going to shape his message to resonate and to align with the genocidal proclivities of Israeli society. That's what he's going to do. When he's speaking to a Western audience, he's going to be much more nuanced. He's going to give an air of being much more nuanced. And Finkelstein saw through that. He just as he's admitted, he's read every of Benny Morris's book twice over, many times. So he knows this man's work. And it is very clear, it is very evident here because Morris is even denying his own words. If you read The Righteous Victim, you will find it there where he said that transfer is inevitable, that it is inbuilt into Zionism, and that Ben-Gurion is making a mistake by not completing the transfer of Palestinians from the land.
Okay. Benny Morris, respond on the wider point in a moment. But first of all, let's talk about this issue of whether Hamas weaponized rape and sexual abuse. Earlier this year, an independent Israeli investigation published details of systematic, widespread sexual violence by Hamas on October the 7th. The Civil Commission's Silence No More report says, in addition to interviews with survivors, it has more than 10,000 photographs and videos filmed by attackers. I have seen other reporting by people like Christina Lamb at the Sunday Times in the UK, who is one of the best journalists, I would argue, in the world, and certainly not partisan in any sense, reporting extensively on the weaponization of rape and sexual assault by Hamas. And yet there are people like Norman Finkelstein who are adamant it never happened. What do you say to that?
Well, as I said, it's nonsense like most of what Finkelstein talks and says. As you say, there were witnesses who ended up alive and saw rapes. There were lots of women who were raped and murdered and looked like they'd been raped and murdered. And there were also rapes, incidentally, of Israeli hostages, women hostages. And I think at least of one case of a male hostage raped by their Hamas captors while they were held in Gaza after October 7th. So I think this is pure nonsense. I noticed that Finkelstein said that he doesn't condemn the Hamas attack on Israel because it came after a lot of Israeli oppression of the Palestinians over the years. And incidentally, that's a point I have made myself, that the Israeli occupation since 1967, and if you like, what happened in 1948, in some way explains how the Hamas did what it did on October 7th. But this doesn't...
No, but earlier you said what Hamas did was simply because they just hated Jews. It was Islamic extremism. That's what you said earlier, so you're contradicting yourself. So right now you are saying that what Israel did is a possible explanation for why Hamas acted the way they did on October 7th. This guy just contradicted himself. Earlier, you've said categorically that it's simply hatred, Jewish hatred, anti-Semitism is what's driving Hamas. You can't trust someone like this. You can't.
Doesn't justify what happened, as Finkelstein was saying, and as this priest was trying to say, who incidentally, you asked him to condemn the Hamas invasion of October 7th, and he said, I don't condone it. He didn't say, I condemn it. He didn't say what you asked him to say.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that. But
I did,
but,
yeah.
well, that's what happened. He didn't actually condemn it. But look, Finkelstein's take is ridiculous. I don't want to get into a academic dialogue with him. I've written what I believe
because you're gonna lose.
Is true of the history, and I've also written journalistic pieces regarding various things. The use of the word genocidal may go down well with a left-leaning or delusioned Western academics, but that's not what happened in the Gaza Strip. There was a war there. Hamas took the first stage, started the war, launched the war, and Israel struck back. You can say that Israel may have struck back disproportionately. That's a question which is up to, I don't know who, to decide whether it's disproportionate or not. But the Israeli counteroffensive wasn't against the population of Gaza, it was against the Hamas. The Hamas was embedded.
It wasn't against them, but they flattened every building in Gaza. Good.
Among the people there, in the houses, in the residential buildings, in underground tunnels, under hospitals, under mosques, inside mosques, etc. And for the Israeli troops and Air Force to get at the Hamas fighters, they ended up collaterally killing people among whom they were embedded, who incidentally supported the Hamas, who are their children and brothers and fathers, etc. They're not divorced from the general Gaza population. This is an idealized version of what goes on in the Gaza Strip. But in any case, there was a war. Israel killed tens of thousands of people in its counteroffensive, but told most of the civilians in most places, get out of this district, that district, the next district, and even individual houses called people up in their homes and said, we're about to attack this house because it contains Hamas positions or Hamas personnel. You have an hour to get out of here.
Does it even make sense? What he just said, does it even make sense? Okay, you're going to call a house, the occupants of a house, and tell them, we're going to bomb this house in an hour because there are Hamas fighters there. So get out so you don't get killed alongside the Hamas fighters. And those guys are supposed to just get up and leave with the Hamas fighters still in the house waiting to be bombed by Israel. Does it? Who are you kidding?
were bombing it, and they told people to leave. This isn't what people do in a genocide. Genocidaires, what they do is they actually round up people and massacre them.
This is exactly the thing about the West. When they commit atrocities, they make it look nice. This thing about Israel, quote unquote, warning people before bombing, it's all a ploy to make them look as though they are ethical. There have been situations where Israel has told people to go to a particular place that it is safe and bombed them along the way while they are living, or while they are in that place that is designated to be safe. So it's all a ploy to say, see, we are moral, we're ethical, we are warning people, we're warning them. It's a cover for the atrocities, nice wars. But by the end of the day, you end up killing innocent people. So your warning isn't worth a piece of toilet paper, used toilet paper. It's not worth any of that. Because by the end of the day, whether you warn them or not, the outcomes are still going to be the same thing. Deaths of innocent people.
Israelis didn't massacre anybody, didn't line up people on the wall and shoot them. They told the civilians, move aside, we want to get to the Hamas. And a lot of people were killed in this process because the Hamas, as I said, hid among them. The word genocide is an absurdity. I've actually studied the genocide by the Muslims. Let me add one sentence. I've actually studied thoroughly one genocide, not the Holocaust, the killing by Turks, the Turkish Muslims of the Christians in Turkey over the years 1894, 1924. I know exactly what a genocide looks like. You kill the men, you drive out the women, you kill the women, you rape the women, and you eventually kill as many people as you can. This isn't what happened in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, Danny Finkelstein,
Go ahead, Piers.
off the back of my interview with the Hamas spokesman.
May I respond?
Let me just ask.
To that?
Well, yeah, but
I would like to respond
you can,
to
but
that.
you can. But Norman, I also just want to conclude the debate by looking slightly forward, because there is supposedly a deal that's been proposed by the Americans where Hamas have apparently agreed if the Israelis leave Gaza, that they will demilitarize. Do you think that is remotely likely to happen?
Well, let's start with the basics. I usually start with international law. And you'll forgive me if it sounds pedantic. And as international law has become more and more marginalized, fewer and fewer people are believing in it. But I still believe in its basic precepts. In July 2025, the International Court of Justice, the supreme legal body in the world, ruled that Israel's occupation of Gaza, Israel's occupation of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, are illegal under international law, and Israel has to leave as quickly, as rapidly as possible. That's the first precept for me, or foundation stone for me. The ICJ,
Hamas
the
disarming. He asked you about Hamas disarming.
Sir, Mr. Morris, this is not the West
You're not answering
Bank.
his question.
You have to carry on in a civilized fashion. Very difficult for you, but try.
Yeah, civility is very difficult for Israelis.
Okay, thank you. So, the bottom line is Israel has no title to any of Gaza. Number two, under international law, there is no prohibition on a people using armed force to expel an occupying power. There is no prohibition on that. Number three, it's odd that we should discuss Hamas having to disarm. Hamas committed a crime of significant magnitude on October 7th. Israel executed a genocide in Gaza, and it continues in its aim of trying to expel the entire population. So why is it that Hamas has to disarm itself, but Israel, the genocidal state, also the state that has breached the prime precept of international law by launching an aggression, a brazen, flagrant aggression, the most brazen, the most flagrant in the modern world against Iran. Why are we talking about Hamas having to disarm? But there's one last point,
Can I
and
say
this is the
something?
critical point. Yes, you've said enough. The critical point. There was no war in Gaza. Hamas is not armed. Piers, ask yourself a simple question. Gaza has been hermetically sealed for 3 years. How can it possibly have any ammunition at this point? This whole Hamas disarmament is a red herring so as to enable Israel to finish up the job it began on October 8th. And it has as its
Piers,
point
can I say
man
something?
Nikolai Mladenov, who gives vomit a bad name.
Okay, Benny Morris,
I really like this guy, Finkelstein.
a final word to you.
Israel wants the Hamas disarmed because it doesn't want a repetition of what Hamas did on October 7th against Israel's civilian population in the south of the country. We don't want a repetition, and we don't want Hamas to do exactly the same thing. If you want to talk about Iran, you should mention that the Iranian regime slaughtered 30 to 40,000 of their own people, Muslims, Iranians, a few months ago. So I wouldn't call it a very innocent country or a very innocent regime. Israel is afraid that the Iranians are trying to get atomic weaponry, and they have said they want to destroy Israel and will use that weaponry to destroy Israel. And that's why Israel has launched its attacks against Iran last year and this year. And that's why America joined them, incidentally, because Trump, whatever his shortcomings, understands that atomic weaponry in the hands of fanatic Islamists in Tehran are a danger not just to Israel, but to the Middle East and perhaps the world itself.
I agree on
Okay,
that point.
I'm going to
Your
leave it there.
thinking is
Thank you
exactly
both.
the same as
I've got to
Donald
leave it there,
Trump's.
Norman. I'm sorry. Norman?
Benny Morris is a physical representation of a reprehensible person. He's a physical representation of what happens when you are just a vile, terrible, psychotic person supporting vile, terrible, psychotic, genocidal things. That's what he is. That's what it is. And I thank God for people like Finkelstein who are able to cut through the nonsense, who are able to see through all the stupidity, and they're able to speak through to power, right? This, people like to make this into a religious conflict. Oh, it's the Muslims, they just hate Jews. That's why this is happening. If it were a religious conflict, I certainly would be on the side of the Jews. But it's not. It's a conflict about land, about dispossession, about ethnic cleansing, about genocide. And no matter if it were Christians doing these things to Muslims, I still would not support them. If the Israelis were all Christians, I am Christian. If the Israelis were all Christian and they were still doing this, I would still be critical of them, even much more critical of them, much more critical of what they're doing. So it is more a religious. The religious imperative is even stronger in the Israeli case because they are absolutely convinced that God gave them the land. And I do not respect that claim. Yes, as a Christian, I do not respect that claim that the Israelis today are saying God gave them that land. No, I don't respect that claim. Nobody should. Anyway, that's all for today. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in another live stream. It's bye for now.